go out on a limb here and guess that this next tip is very much an extension of the one you just mentioned,
Yep.
walking the talk.
Walking the talk.
So if you say you want ideas, you might want to actually act as though you do when people bring you ideas, right?
Yes.
So, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth. So what, can you elaborate a little bit more on what do you mean by walking the talk? And then,
Yep. Yep. So my favorite example of this, and it happens everywhere, is you'll have, you know, the quarterly priority or here's our annual priorities. And a lot of times things in that list will fall, innovation, diversity, equity, and inclusion, all these things that like, yes. And then you'll say, okay, well, like, what are we doing in that? And you'll find out that there's like, okay, we're going to have a lunch and learn on DEI. And then we're going to allocate one person to work on innovation for the whole company. It's like that's not what you spend on priorities. That's what you spend on hobbies. So if it really is a priority, invest in it like it's a priority. Invest in it like the other priorities that you have around probably optimizing things, expanding into new markets, etc. Essentially one of the rules of innovation, you can tell how committed to innovation or change of any kind an organization is based on the resources they allocate to it.
mm,
And again, it doesn't have to be a huge amount of resources, but a lunch and learn or a person or $100,000, that's not a priority for. So if you're going to say it's a priority, resource it like it's a priority.
mm,
If you're going to say I want your ideas, have a plan for how you're going to act on the ideas.
pretty simple, but
Pretty
much,
simple.
much easier said than done, huh?
I was to say, it takes me back to growing up when my mom would always say, actions speak louder than words. Like, yeah, it's true on all sorts of levels.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously this comes into play like in living the core values of the organization.
Yeah.
But I think what you're pointing to is that that's a pretty obvious one, right? If you're going to say, "Hey, these are our five core values," and the leaders aren't living them, that's a pretty serious issue. You're pointing to something a little bit more subtle, which is if you're going to claim that something is a priority, there should be some pretty good evidence that it's a priority. Otherwise, people probably aren't going to take those priorities very seriously when they're spoken.
Yep.
Would you say that's probably true from what you've seen?
That that is exactly kind of the result of not walking the talk is you get a lot of people who, and I've heard this in a lot of companies, like, oh, this is just the management flavor of the month. Don't worry about ignore it. It'll be another thing next quarter.
So what's a
And
great example you've seen where somebody has walked the talk? Maybe you could give us a caricature of
mm,
of a leader who's kind of lived these 3 points and how that's really created the space for innovation
yeah,
and for greatness in other capacities as well, but maybe particularly around innovation.
yep. Well, one of my go-tos is A.G. Lafley when he was CEO of P&G the first time. Um, is that one of the many things he did was he established very clear kind of guidelines, like the consumer is boss. We listen to the consumer voice above all. And there were plenty of times in meetings where there'd be lots of debate, and someone would finally say, "What did we hear from consumers?" And that voice, the consumer's voice, won over finance, won over marketing, one over supply chain. What does the consumer want? The other thing A.G. Lafley did is he identified different types of innovation and then was very clear about, X% of your budget needs to go to this type, this type, this type, and, X% of your results need to be derived from each of these types. So he came up with long-term metrics and incentives. And, he also allocated a lot of resources
Hmm.
to innovation. So everything he said, he followed up in very clear actions that people could see, and how they were evaluated and how people were getting staffed and how decisions were being made.